And now it's with great pleasure that I introduce to you today our featured speaker. Dr. Salome Rheim is the Dean of the School of Social Work at the University of Connecticut, and she is nationally and internationally recognized for her work on cultural competence, social justice, human rights, and economic development. And she is a mentor to many students that are seeking higher education in their master's degrees, and has been an inspiration to many, including our own Executive Director of Latino Community Fund, John Paul Chesson Cardenas. And so it's with pleasure that we will hear from Dr. Raheim.
Buenos días a todos. I am so honored to be here. I'm so grateful for the invitation, and it is my hope that the remarks that I will briefly make here this morning will help to frame the day, give some fuel for further conversation and further thought. And I, too, throughout the day, hope to be inspired by the conversations and the presentations. I'll speak here a few minutes about the conference theme, the conference purpose, which is developing cultural competence with Latino youth, families, and communities. And as I look upon this gathering today, it takes me back about 10 years. 10 years at the University of Iowa, where then our own, now your own, John Paul Chesson Cardenas, helped to develop and lead a collaborative partnership that created an event just such as this. And having been there, having witnessed it, at the time, I was the director of the School of Social Work at the University of Iowa, and John Paul was a member of the staff. So thinking back on what we did in 1999, and then watching it grow over a period of 10 years, and that Latino conference, even though I'm not there and John Paul's not there, that Latino conference is still an annual event, alive and well, and has grown to a participation of 500 people. So I see from what you have been doing over the last 2 years what the possibilities are for growth, expansion, inclusion, and I wish you well having gotten this far along in your journey. I'm so pleased to be here today because, and I should tell you a little bit about my background. My appearance and my name just confuse people. So let me tell you a little bit about my background. I am African American by identity, but certainly have the heritage and the DNA of a number of racial ethnic groups. I remember once being at one of our Latino conferences, and I did not talk about my background, and some of the women, the Puerto Rican women who were there, came up to me later on and asked me why I was trying to pass, and, why I wasn't fessing up. And if I could speak Spanish better, I could pass as Latina, but my Spanish has not progressed that well. Nonetheless, being African American, being a woman in the United States, a woman of color in the United States, and a leader in education, it is very, very clear to me that the theme of this professional development institute is critical for the survival of the nation. Too often, there is consideration that what is happening with one group is not really relevant to what is happening with another group. And I know when I was director at the University of Iowa School of Social Work, and we were putting our energy and our effort into the Latino conference, there were people who asked me, well, you know, why are you focusing on Latinos? Why don't you focus on African Americans? And it is not that African Americans were ignored in our cultural competence efforts, but in Iowa, a state that was 96 to 94% white, depending upon when you take the stats. And considering that in some places the Latino population had increased 1,000% over the course of 10, 15 years, so that in some places the numbers had gone from minuscule to 42%, nearing 50% in some places. There was a need, there was an opportunity. And as a social work educator, as a person who has the honor, the privilege, and the responsibility of preparing social work students, the next generation of our profession, how could I not? How can I not respond when there was need, opportunity, and fantastic people like John Paul Chasson Cardenas to help us make the community connections and develop the collaborations that made it possible to not just have the conference, because as has been said, this conference is really, it's a flashpoint for what happens, what can happen throughout the year. And so I believe that it's important to work where we are and to go when we're called. And I've answered the call to come here, and I'm just so pleased for the opportunity. I also want to take a moment to reflect on the very moving presentation that the board made. I so relate to the things that you said, both the things that are similar to my background as well as those that are different. And for us to work together effectively, that's what we have to do. We have to appreciate the similarities. We also have to appreciate the differences so that we don't impose our understandings and misunderstand and make missteps, but at the same time, see where there are those connections so that we know there are things that we have in common and there are important reasons for us to work together. So the next slide, as I talk about cultural competence briefly in these few minutes this morning, I just want to acknowledge that cultural competence is a journey. Some people, one more time, click, there you go. Some people resist the term cultural competence, thinking that it's an end state, and in some ways it certainly could be misused. But I believe that as we think about how we can work in culturally competent ways with Latino youth families and communities, that it's critical that we remember that it's a process, it's a journey, we never get there, but it's important to continue to do the work so that we can improve. And as we talk this morning about what is possible, and I bring up the Latino Conference, again, not as in the Iowa Latino Conference, not just because it is an event, but because through that conference, through this conference, there's this opportunity to develop these collaborations and these partnerships that can exponentially increase our ability to do effective work. The other thing that I want to reflect on from the board's